Good morning, students. Today we come to learn about layers of the retina, which is the most important capturing image structure within the eyeball. So remember that these are the layers of the retina from most internal to most external portion. So we have internal limiting membrane, followed by nerve fiber layer, followed by ganglion cell layer, followed by inner plexiform layer, inner nuclear layer, outer plexiform layer, outer nuclear layer, inner segment of photoreceptors, external limiting membrane, outer segment of photoreceptors, and then retinal pigment epithelium, which is the last but not the least layer. Remember that grossly the retina is divided into neurosensory retina, okay, and the retinal pigment epithelium. So neurosensory retina is up to the outer segment of photoreceptors. Then after that, retinal pigment epithelium, after which you have the choriocapillaries or the choroid. Okay, then you have the sclera. Okay, so now let's look at this particular picture. This is the picture of the retina when you do fundoscopy. Okay, there's the optic disc, this is the fovea, this is the macular area. Okay, this is the vascular arcade. Okay, surrounding the macula. All right, so talking about layers of the retina. So the most superficial or the most internal layer is one of the internal limiting membrane. Okay, this is the internal limiting membrane here. All right, this is pictorially shown. Then after that, what comes is the nerve fiber layer. Okay, that's the nerve fiber layer here. After the nerve fiber layer, you have the ganglion cell layer. All right, look at the ganglion cell layer over here. Okay, then you have inner plexiform layer. All right, inner plexiform layer. Okay, that's the inner nuclear layer containing the nucleus of certain almost all the important cells within the retina. Okay, then outer plexiform layer over here. All right, it's outer plexiform layer. It is a space where edema can easily settle. Then you have the outer nuclear layer over here. That is the layer where you have the nucleus of the photoreceptors. Okay, then you have the photoreceptors here. Okay, then after that, external limiting membrane, then retinal pigment epithelium over there. Okay, so remember photoreceptors have inner and outer segments. Okay, remember this very well. And displaying to my right are certain important structures here. Okay, so this is axon at surface of retina passing via optic nerve. Okay, look at how they have been displayed horizontally. Okay, ganglion cell have been found here. Look at molar cell, they span the whole length. Molar cells, they are the gray in color, they span the whole length of the retina, the gray colored one. Okay, the whole length of the retina, giving it support. Okay, now, so supporting glial cell, that's another name for the molar cell. Then you have bipolar cells over here. They have two main portions that communicate with cells. That's why they are called bipolar over here. You see that? All right. Then you have the amacrine cells over here. Okay. Horizontal cells disposed like this. Okay, there's a horizontal cell over here. So you have rod over here. Okay, this is the rod and this nucleus. Then this is the cone. All right. Then we have pigment cells of the choroid over here. Okay. Now let's talk about blood supply. So from internal limiting membrane to inner nuclear layer. So internal limiting membrane to inner nuclear layer. Okay. So internal limiting membrane. Okay, up to inner nuclear layer, from internal limiting membrane up to inner nuclear layer. The blood supply is from central retinal artery and its branches. But then the rest of the layers, that is from outer plexiform layer to retinal pigment epithelium, the supply is from what? Choriocapillaries. Okay, that's what I mean by the rest of the layers are supplied by choriocapillaries. Okay, now let's talk about inner nuclear layer. It contains nuclei of the following cells. Which cells are these? Bipolar, okay, horizontal, amacrine, and molar. That's the inner nuclear layer. Okay, so let's go back to the inner nuclear layer. Okay, so it contains what? The nucleus of what? Bipolar cells. Okay, horizontal cells. So this is the bipolar cell here, horizontal cell here. Okay, amacrine cell here. Okay, and of course molar cells. Okay, so that is the inner nuclear layer. Inner nuclear because the inner side contains nucleus of all these important cells within the neurosensory retina. Now, outer nuclear layer, it contains nuclei of all the photoreceptor cells, as we previously spoke about. Okay, look at the outer nuclear layer. It contains nuclei. Okay, this is the nucleus of this rod. The nucleus. Okay, so outer nuclear layer contains nuclei of the photoreceptor cell, being the rods and the cones. Okay. Now, there's another thing which is very important here for us to see. The retina is not horizontally same thickness everywhere. There is a depression at the level of the fovea. Have you seen? It is not totally and throughout the same thickness. There's a depression at the center of the fovea. Okay, so that is it for you. But remember that this is the fovea. Okay, it starts depressing here. Okay, then within the foveal vascular zone. Okay. Then within the foveal vascular zone, we have the foveola. And within the foveola, we have umbo. So the depression starts from the fovea coming down. Okay. That may explain why you may have macular edema being very common at the fovea at the macula. The reason is that it is a place of descent, depression. So fluid can easily descend and go and accumulate over there. So logically, anatomically, it goes to state that if there's a depression within the fovea, okay, or the macular fovea complex, it therefore goes to logically think that you cannot have all the layers of the retina over there. Some of the layers obviously will be absent. The question is, which layers of the fovea, which layers of the retina or fovea are absent at the fovea? These are the layers. So the ganglion cell is absent, inner plexiform layer is absent, and the inner nuclear layer is also absent. The ganglion cell layer, okay? So the ganglion cell layer is absent, inner plexiform layer is absent, inner nuclear layer is absent, and that explains why there's a depression at the center of the retina, which is the fovea. Look at the depression again, okay? Because three major layers are absent. The ganglion cell layer, the inner plexiform layer, and the inner nuclear layer. They are all absent at the level of the fovea. But remember, there are major retinal cells which you need to recapitulate on. Among them are photoreceptor cells, horizontal cells, bipolar cells, amacrine cells, ganglion cells, and molar cells. How does this happen? There's what we call transduction. So information is sent from one cell to the other and then to the other and to stimulate the retina, and it goes through the optic nerve, and then it goes to the brain for interpretation and better visualization. So as I said, information passes from the photoreceptor cells, okay, some photoreceptor cell that moves posteriorly, okay, light will have entered into the eye to stimulate the photoreceptor to receive the light. But then after that, the information passes from photoreceptor to horizontal cells, and then from horizontal cells to what? Bipolar cells. From bipolar, information passes on to what? Amacrine cells. From amacrine to ganglion cells, from ganglion to molar cells. Then from there, the information what goes to the optic nerve, from the optic nerve to the brain for what? Better interpretation. Okay, so uh, before I come to this particular picture, let's pictorial look at this particular thing that I was talking about. Okay, so information comes from where? Look at the photoreceptors over here being rods and cones. Okay, from there, from the photoreceptors, information passes on to the horizontal cells over here. Okay, on the horizontal cells. Then you have what? Bipolar cells. Okay, from bipolar cells, what does the information go to? it connects here, okay, to amacrine. From amacrine, there's connection and connectivity, okay, to ganglion cells here. Okay, the ganglion cells, the information travels onto the optic nerve and then to the brain for interpretation. So this picture here tells you how information comes from the photoreceptor. So this is the neurosensory retina. Retinal pigment epithelium is found over here. Photoreceptors are on top here. Then information passes on through all the cells that we spoke about. Okay, bipolar cells, horizontal cells, amacrine cells, then molar cells. Okay, then after that, read the ganglion cells over here. Everything is gathered together and passes through, because remember the ganglion cells come together to form the optic nerve. So information passes from all these layers from the ganglion cells and then passes through the optic nerve going to the brain for interpretation. So remember, the retinal cells have been classified into those that receive light, known as photoreceptors, those that transmit light or information, known where we have the bipolar cells, horizontal cells, amacrine cells, and the molar cells. Okay, so remember, and then we have senders of information. These are the ganglion cells. So photoreceptors, we know about them. Okay, and then those that transmit information like transmitters. Remember, these are what? I'm going back to the picture. Okay, how? So we have what? Bipolar cells. Okay, so from the bipolar cells, where does the information go to? Horizontal cells. Okay, from horizontal cells, we have what? The amacrine cells. Okay, amacrine cells. Okay, then from amacrine cells, we have what? Molar cells. That's how information, these are called the transmitters of information. And as we've spoken about, these come from the photoreceptors. Okay, these are photoreceptors. The information goes to what? The transmitters of information. The information here means light. Okay, and as we've said, the transmitters are made up of what? Bipolar cells, horizontal cells, amacrine cells, and the molar cells. Okay, then after that, the information goes to what? Senders. The senders of information goes to what? The ganglion cells. Okay, so senders, where are they sending the information? They are sending the information to the optic nerve. Okay, to the optic nerve. Remember, the ganglion cells come right from the optic nerve. So from the optic nerve, information passes through the optic nerve, goes to the brain for interpretation and proper visualization. Okay, there's a layer of fluid accumulation on the retina, right? So the main layer where fluid accumulates is the outer plexiform layer. Okay, outer plexiform layer. So this is the outer plexiform layer. That is the layer where which gives room for fluid accumulation or edema. Okay, the whole retina, the layer which allows fluid accumulation is known as what? The outer plexiform layer. Okay, however, when the fluid is excessive, it can involve the photoreceptor layer and other inner retinal layers. Let me give you a typical example here. This is optical coherence tomography image of a um, normal retina. Remember that it doesn't have the same thickness all over. Okay, the fovea here is, look at the macular complex is found here. At the inner side, you have the fovea vacuolar zone, foveolar umbo. So there's a depression here because there are three major layers that it lacks. Okay, that we spoke about. That is why there's a depression here. Okay, so this is normal retina. Okay, now edema will usually start from the outer plexiform layer. All right, so for example, there's fluid accumulation here. It has obliterated or made disappear the depression from the fovea at the center over here because of what? Edema and fluid accumulation. So what should be like a depression or a valley now is mountainous because of fluid accumulation. Now it has gone beyond the boundaries of outer plexiform layer to invade other layers of the retina. So same thing, fluid accumulation at the outer plexiform layer. The fluid is so much so that it has gone beyond it and affect the photoreceptor layer, it does not end there. Another inner retinal layers because the fluid is so much. Okay, so students, this brings me to the end of today's lecture. I will urge you on to continue learning hard, revise your notes, and when we meet in class, you can clarify more. I see you again. Take care of yourself.